Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our GT Awareness Week parent webinar. I'm Paulina Van Eden Hill, Executive Director of the Texas Association for the Gifted and Talented, or TAGT. TAGT exists to connect and empower parents and educators to meet the unique needs of gifted individuals through awareness, advocacy, and action. Today, we are so excited to host you and hundreds of GT parents around the state and nation. Whether you're watching from your living room or are surrounded by parents in the same boat as you, hopefully you feel connected and empowered by this community. As a parent of a gifted student, we know you may feel isolated, maybe even frustrated. Know that TAGT is behind you. Through our various parent resources, TAGT affiliated parent support groups, events, and an online community to help you better understand your gifted student and their needs. We also support members and educators through professional learning opportunities online and in person so they can also be a resource to you and your student. Visit txgifted.org and txgifted.org/parents for more information. This week, we celebrate GT Awareness Week, and what a time to be an advocate for GT in Texas. As many of you know, House Bill 3 proposes the elimination of the GT allotment. The GT allotment provides specific and designated funding for GT students and programs. TAGT believes that it is imperative that this designated GT funding must be maintained to ensure our students and programs are successfully meeting the unique needs of these kids. Many of you have participated in advocacy efforts to ensure any new Texas school finance law that passes this session maintains this funding. Through our advocacy as an organization and through our passionate membership, 5 amendments were filed yesterday to HB 3 to reinstate the allotment, strengthen program requirements, and require school board policies and reporting. We'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone who has participated. The House votes on HB 3 and these amendments tomorrow morning, Wednesday, April 3rd. Please take a moment to visit txgifted.org/advocacy to find advocacy resources, review our position on HB 3 and the amendments, and to find your state representative. Please contact your representative tonight or tomorrow morning to ask for their support in these GT amendments by Representative Shaheen, Representative Turner and Tallarico, and Representative Gian. If you'd like to stay up to date on forthcoming legislative issues or TAGT webinars, parent resources, events, and other news, please sign up for our alerts at txgifted.org/advocacy as well. Okay, now on to the main event. Today, we are joined by Dr. Tracy Ford Inman. Dr. Inman has devoted her career to meeting the needs of young people, especially those who are gifted and talented. She has taught on both the high school and collegiate levels, as well as in summer programs for gifted and talented youth. A Kentucky Teacher of the Year semifinalist in 1992, she now serves as Associate Director of the Gifted Center, or the Center for Gifted Studies at WKU in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Tracy has presented on the state and national and international levels, trained hundreds of teachers in differentiation and gifted education, and published multiple articles. She's the co-author of Parenting Gifted Children 101, a TAGT Legacy Book Award winner, and co-editor of Parenting Gifted Children, the authoritative guide from the National Association for Gifted Children, a compilation of the best articles in parenting for high potential, which won the Legacy Award in 2011. She's president-elect of Kentucky Association for the Gifted Education. Please welcome Dr. Tracy Ford Inman.
Now can you hear me? That's going to be better, isn't it?
We can, Tracy. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. That one? I'm trying to get my PowerPoint here on screen. Hopefully you can see that now. Can you see my screen okay, Paulina?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. I have sidekick Jessie here who's helping me with things. It's really exciting for me to be here with you, and it would have been easier had Paulina just said, and this is Tracy. That's always much better. But one of the things that she failed to mention is that I am the parent of 2 gifted young men now, and one is a twice exceptional young man. And so I have lived this as a parent and as an educator and in various ways, but to me, it's that parenting part that really drives it home. So our topic tonight is, how do we work best with our child's school? What can we do? Now, I know that we're going to have some parents out there, and if you're like me, you had a wish list, and that's, parents, what do you wish teachers knew about gifted children and about your child? Many of you are probably educators as well, and see, you might be asking, what do you wish parents knew, teachers? For those of you who are in groups with other people, please take a few moments and talk to each other about that. And for those of you who may be single folks, please brainstorm a little bit on that chat room. What do you wish others knew? I'll give you about a minute for that. I hope you were able to have a nice conversation with some people. But let's look at some of the things that we wish teachers knew. Well, how about this? I appreciate it when you don't roll your eyes when I say gifted. I know in the state of Kentucky, we were absolutely thrilled when we had a commissioner who was not afraid to say the word gifted out loud. We might like it when you appreciate it when you take the time to look at test scores and opinions from experts about my child's competencies, that you really are going to look at my child as a whole child. How about it when you realize that being gifted is only part of what your child is? That you understand the child will not excel in every area, and we don't have unrealistic expectations. Think how satisfying it is when teachers really communicate with parents. When the teacher starts advocating for all the children in the school, it can make a difference systemically. It's so important that children are not discussed with folks outside the family, outside other educators the child has. I'm not happy when you make assumptions about my parenting. That's an easy thing for educators to do sometimes. I think this is one that really frustrates parents, when teachers don't understand what acceleration can do for young people. And I appreciate it when you help my child, not only scholastically, but also socially and emotionally. Now, I don't know if any of these happen to be some of the same things you wished teachers knew. It might be. Now let's look at some of those things we wish parents knew. And I'm not going to read this out loud to you by any means, but as you're skimming over it, I'm going to ask that you pay special attention to question number 2, or to comment number 2, and number 4, 5, and 9. As you skim through those, I don't think you'll be too surprised by some of them, but I think what we always have to remember is that every person in contact with your child, we have to believe wants the absolute best for your student, for your child. And educators get into teaching because they love children and want them to succeed, and I honestly believe that. I don't know that you're going to find a group of folks who work any harder. So when a partnership happens, magic can happen for that child. The best way to see that your child reaches his full potential is to form alliances. Look at that word, that's a strong word. Because parents and teachers are the strongest resources we have for each other. We're both going to come to the table with knowledge that the other person doesn't have. But we also need a reality check, folks. And that is that the vast majority of educators do not have formal training in gifted education. In fact, out of the 50 states, there is not one single one that requires gifted education for pre-service teachers. And that's a really sad statement to make. Now, of course, they get training with the other exceptional children and realize that gifted folks is an area of exceptionality. And some of them may actually have a chapter in their book focusing with gifted education if the professor happens to do it. I know I filled in for a class. I was given 30 minutes to talk about gifted education with one of the classes, and I was excited to get that. But realize that is not something they come equipped with when they enter the classroom. So a lot of the teachers think the differentiation is for the struggling learners, and they wholly support that, and they learn how to modify the curriculum, make accommodations, and they don't realize that that needs to be happening with the other end of the spectrum because they believe the myths. Gifted kids are fine, they're going to get by on their own. Wow, he's finished so quickly, let's have him tutor the other kids. That's the best way for him to learn things. They believe all those myths because they haven't been taught differently. And let's face it, there is a huge pressure on these folks when it comes to accountability and high stakes testing. And there's so much pressure to bring the lower folks up who are struggling than it is to have those who are proficient or beyond to go ahead and succeed. So that's the reality of what we have. I'm going to let you read this for yourself, but let me just preface it by saying this is from an elementary school principal of the year. That term continuous progress at the bottom is extremely powerful because that means wherever the child is in whatever subject area, grade level, we want continuous progress. And for some gifted children, that can actually be 2 years growth in 1 year's time if the child has the services that are appropriate. All right, so let's look at it. How are we best going to partner with schools? The first main concept is you have to be informed. Now, what does that mean? You have to be informed about your child, as a person. So what are her likes? What are her dislikes? What interests does she have? What challenges does she have? What about strengths? Personality traits. Is she stubborn? Does she like to work with other people? You need to know about the child as a child. You also need to know about the child as a learner. This is where more objective data comes in. It might be test scores, those kinds of things, but realize too, it comes from what you see at home, that anecdotal evidence that you have to support what kind of learner he is. It might also come from looking at what are the strengths as a learner, the challenges that he has. What are the best ways that he likes to learn? Does he like to do things independently or with other folks? But you really have to know all about your child as a person and as a learner, and you're going to be able to offer that information to the educator as you partner with them. You also need to realize that there are laws, regulations, and policies that govern the programs that you have. Now, I think most of the population on this call tonight is probably from Texas, but whatever state you're from, you need to know what those laws and regulations are. Let's look for just a moment, and this is going to take us to the NAGC website where it says gifted by state. And as we look at this, I'm just going to scroll down and we'll do Texas. You may or may not be familiar with this resource, but it's a nice one. So one of the first things it tells us, who's working at the State Department? Who's working at the education agency? We've got those folks. And there we have Paulina, Executive Director, right here for TAGT. But we also have some specifics here. And if you look, it's actually going to tell you what the numbers look like. What does the funding look like? Is there a mandate? And this is true for all the states. I do want to point out to you, though, that the data is a little old. It takes a while to get that latest data, but it is a wonderful resource for folks.
Tracy, we can't see that screen.
You can't see that screen. Okay. Jessie is coming to the rescue here. And you know what? We don't have to do that. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jessie. All right, then let me just go back one. This is what I was mentioning all the different states. And then you can see when we click on Texas, it gives all this information. And you can do that with any state. So lots of good information there. We're switching so you can see the main screen here. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. So you need to be informed of what are those laws, what are those regulations, what are those policies of your state and district. And then you have to realize that there is best practice. What do we know about best practice? Some of you may or may not realize that there are programming standards. Now these do date from 2010 and they're getting ready to be revamped, but they are incredibly strong right now as they are. And you can see the 6 different learning areas. You've got learning development, assessment, curriculum and instruction. You can see all those different areas. And let's just take one example, learning and development. Look at this self-understanding one. One of the powerful things about the standards is its student outcome. So what should the student outcome be for self-understanding? Student with gifts and talents demonstrate understanding of and respect for similarities and differences between themselves and their peer group and others in the general population. So what is that going to look like? What is the evidence-based practice? Well, educators are going to provide a variety of research-based grouping practices so that they're interacting with individuals of various gifts and abilities and strengths. And then we're going to see that educators also model respect for individuals with diverse abilities. So one of the things that you need to know about is that there are standards and you need to kind of look at your school. Okay, what are we doing right? What do we need to be working on? I think one of the other things that you really need to understand is just the language itself. As most professions, we've got all kinds of jargon that goes along with the educational field, and we're throwing out terms like, you know, TUI and ADHD and IEPs and all these kind of things. We're just throwing those around. Make sure you know what that person's talking about, and there are lots of resources for that. I just happened to put one from Hoagie's Gifted, and if you aren't familiar with Hoagie's, I think you'll find that to be a really great resource for you. So you need to understand what that jargon is. You also need to understand what should services look like. Now, when we go back to that, to the standards, that's for identification purposes as well as services. And I'm going to use the term services throughout this. I don't really like the term program, because a program sounds like something you either belong to or you don't belong to, that you can move in of and out of. And if you are gifted, you're going to be gifted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so services need to be provided that can provide for continuous service. And those services look in lots, they come in different shapes and forms. One of those is acceleration. The other main form is enrichment. Now, when it comes to acceleration, and I'm going to go to another website here, I'm going to go to accelerationinstitute.org. And Jessie's going to make it so you guys can see it. Acceleration focuses primarily on moving that student ahead with a different pace. And there are 20 different kinds of acceleration. So it might be that your child starts kindergarten early. It could be a whole grade acceleration. It could be that he's working on the 6th grade level in math, even though he's a 4th grader. So it's a subject acceleration for that. advanced placement courses, dual credit courses. There are lots and lots of different kinds of acceleration possibilities. On this website, you're going to see two of the main studies. The first was The Nation Deceived, How Schools Hold Back America's Brightest Students. And basically, it looked at 50 years of research dealing with acceleration. And that's not just grade skipping. Remember, it's a lot of different kinds that we can see right here, all these different kinds. And it basically said that there's no more effective or least expensive service for gifted children than acceleration. Now, when that's done correctly, and that's a big caveat. The follow-up was A Nation Empowered, and this deals with best practices, and you're really going to see vignettes and things of examples of acceleration at work. So this is a wonderful resource to go to. You can actually download both of those if you want to find out more information. I'm going to let you do that because I just apparently did something. There we go. I'm going to let Jessie do that. I tried to do it myself, and of course it didn't work too well. Okay, so acceleration is one type of service. The other type of service is enrichment. And enrichment sounds pretty much like what it is. And that is, oh, I'm sorry, that's what we just talked about. Acceleration is highly effective in terms of cognitive, social, and emotional growth. When it comes to enrichment, we're looking at strategies that go beyond what that grade level is. So acceleration actually results in advanced placement of some sort, moving ahead, credit. Enrichment doesn't do that. So when we look at enrichment, there are lots and lots of different kinds of possibilities. Maybe some of your folks are in Lego League. It's a wonderful opportunity that blends Legos with robotics. This year's theme is Into Orbit, so it deals with research along with programming those robots. Maybe it's future problem solving. And I do have to stress that you might have to step in as a parent and volunteer to take on teams. Teachers are thinly stretched. They may be very willing to work with you on it, but realize it can be very effective for you to step up and be that coach. Math Counts, those folks who love math, it's a wonderful program. Destination Imagination, it's similar to Odyssey of the Mind, and these are open-ended concepts with children tapping into their creativity to solve problems. Duke Tip, Texas is one of the Duke Tip states, and if you go to their website, you're going to see all kinds of information about programming that's available, online programming, as well as summer camps, those kind of things. Lots and lots of enrichment opportunities. This is a photo from one of our Super Saturdays programs. And so we had young folks working with the Aviation Heritage Park Board. They volunteered their time, and they actually learned about planes and were able to take a flight in a plane. And this is Saturday enrichment programs held at the university. Travel study is an incredible enrichment opportunity, and this is a group of our folks who went to Italy. Now, you're going to see the word Vampy here, V-A-M-P-Y, and that's because it stands for the Summer Program for Verbally and Mathematically Precocious Youth. So you see why we call it Vampy. I'm going to let you read those. These are students who came to our programming and just last summer, and I want you to kind of see the things that they focus on. How about the fact that life is in color when she's at Vampy, not black and white? I love the fact that Hayden is trying to prove to himself that he's capable, that Micah has a happy place, and that Christian is finding an identity beyond I'm the smart kid. This is what one of the parents said about the summer program. And this summer program, it's for gifted kids who take the ACT or SAT and have qualifying scores equal to that as an incoming college freshman. And they take one class in great depth where they have a passion for an area and they study it, whether it's mathematics for 3 weeks or astronomy, humanities. This is what one of the parents said. Oops. I'll let you read that one. Now, those opportunities, some of them are right there at the school. Some of them parents need to step in and volunteer to host those things at the school. Some of them are held at universities, held throughout the United States. For example, with Vampy, we have kids who come from all over the US and we have folks from abroad. We've already got an application from somebody from Russia to come this summer. But if you don't know about the opportunity, it's not going to be one for people. And speaking of that, I just want to throw this out here. We have a wonderful grant from the Qatar Foundation. And I know I'm not saying that right. It's the country that's QATAR. And we have money for children who are wanting to study Arabic in our Vampy classes for free. So if you're interested in that, you need to go to our website or contact me. My information is going to be on there. But that's the kind of thing that can make a huge difference for young people. Now, before we get to the differentiation part, I want you to think about acceleration, all the different possibilities. Think about enrichment. Take a few moments with your colleagues around you, your friends, other parents, or on the chat room, and I want you to answer a couple of questions. And one would be, what examples, what kind of acceleration and enrichment do you see at your child's school? And then the second part of that, how might your child benefit from one of those services? Now, if I were with you, I'd be seeing you talk to each other or not talk to each other. I could read how much time you need and how much time you don't need. But I hope that you were able to have a little bit of a conversation with that. And if you're not seeing examples of acceleration and enrichment in your child's school, you need to be asking some questions. Now, there is a third word up there that's highlighted, and that's the word differentiation. Because differentiation can actually be an acceleration service or an enrichment service, just depending on how it's used. And that is acceleration, of course, if the child's going to be going faster through the material. And perhaps be able to finish and get credits faster, or enrichment if that differentiation is going more in depth, or it's in addition to what the child could be learning. Now, I will also tell you that differentiation is going to be what most schools tell you is the service for your child. And in some cases, that's true. In other cases, it's not. So when I talk about differentiation, what is it really? Well, differentiation is where you take what's being taught, how it's being taught, at what level it's being taught, and you match that to the learner. And that would be the learner's interest, readiness levels, learner profile. And it's not more of something, it's different somethings. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Harry Passow, that he was an incredible leader, one of our founding fathers. And this litmus test, that's kind of what I call it, is a wonderful resource for educators as well as parents. So you have a learning experience, and I'll talk to the educators in the audience right now. And your learning experience, you're going to ask a few questions. And the first one is, would most other students of this age want to learn this? Then you're going to ask the second one, could most other students of this age learn this? That's very different from the would. We're talking more about ability and readiness. And then should most other students of this age learn this? And basically what you have here, if you answer yes to those, then it's not differentiated. It's going to be appropriate for every learner. If you say no, that's when you know that you're differentiating it or it needs to be differentiated. And that's the same for lower end of the spectrum as well as the gifted. So how do you know if differentiation is really happening? And I've had parents call and they say nothing's going on. The child says, you know, that nothing's happening. And then when you talk to the teacher, you realize that the child's been differentiated for, it's just done in such a very smooth way that the kid didn't even realize it. But it can also be the opposite, where differentiation is supposed to be going on and it's not. So one of the things you can do is ask about pre-assessment. And pre-assessment is that diagnostic piece. What, does my child already know this material? And if he does, how much of it and what needs to happen after that? So you can't differentiate unless you have data to base it on. So one thing to look at is what pre-assessment strategies are being used. And then you can ask about modifying. What kind of modifications are you making? Quite a bit of this presentation that I'm doing comes from one of the books that Paulina mentioned earlier, that Parenting Gifted Kids 101. And in that, we interviewed hundreds of folks who were parents, GT teachers, GT resource people, administrators, educators, and you know, I already showed you one quote that was by a principal. This is from a district GT coordinator. And basically she's saying, differentiation isn't throwing everything out and starting fresh with each child. It can just be small little tweaks to the curriculum that can be made. There's a lot of literature out there concerning differentiation, acceleration, and enrichment, but realize the research and the information that's out there shows that it's best practice when it's done in a certain way. And so that's what you need to be informed about. You need to be able to know what is best practice, what does it look like? And then you also need to know about where do you find good information. Well, we already know TAGT is a great place to find it. And I shared with you an example of NAGC when we went to look at the state of the states. And then we also looked at Hoagie's Gifted. I think I just showed you that with jargon. I want you to take a moment and talk with someone near you or on the chat room. Please list a resource or discuss a resource where you have found wonderful information.
While you guys are discussing, wanted to let you know that there's a Q&A box towards the bottom of your screen. That's where Tracy will be pulling questions from when it comes to that time. So if you have questions, click that Q&A box and type them in there.
Thank you, Paulina. You guys keep talking. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a resource to show you, okay? So glad you're with me. I don't know how many of you are familiar with NAGC's tip sheets, and that's timely information for parents sheets. And this has come out of NAGC through the parenting arm, mostly the leadership and the parent community network. And what we've done is we have created concise, powerful little front and back sheets on a variety of topics. This one happens to be advocacy. And for most of them, there's going to be food for thought. You're going to see very similar format with them, including where do we go for more information. This talks about what do you do with meetings with teachers and how do you follow up with it. Right now we have them on acceleration and how to find a therapist, asynchronistic behavior, gifted 101, the list goes on. And so I'd like for you to know that that's out there, and you can just go to nagc.org and look for tip sheets, or you can also go to the resource sheet that I've given TAGT to post with the information. And if there's something there that you want to have it on and you haven't seen it yet, go back to nothing, and then please ask, and we'll try to create one for you. They're done by experts in the field, and that's one really powerful resource. So you need to be informed about multiple things. Your child is a person, your child is a learner, laws, regulations, policy of state and district, best practice, and where to find information.
The cursor disappeared on me.
And our cursor just disappeared. So, oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. The next step, the next big tip that I have is you have to have a very clear purpose, a very clear message and purpose for your meetings. And your purpose does not need to be, or your message does not need to be, my kid is bored. Doesn't need to be negative at all. It needs to be as positive as possible. Because that's what's going to open up real dialogue. So you really need to think seriously, what are my concerns? And there might be quite a few of them. Try to distill that down to one or two, and then try to figure out what you want the result to be after your meeting. What do we want to do? This comes from a parent. This is a parent, and this is Amy Berry, and I'll let you read that. And it talks about how she knew something had to be done. And note the part she says, when my second grader wrote a note to his teacher on his homework, I need harder problems, I took that as an undeniable signal that I needed to set up a meeting. So you might have a message. And this could have been Amy's. My son loves math, but he already knows the math material. Can we discuss other options for him? That's not threatening. It's factual. You may need to produce evidence to explain, how he knows the material. But then think about all the questions that could be asked as you're having a discussion. How do you determine if he's mastered it? Is there a place where he might have a choice of how he wants to go about it or show what he's learned? What can we do if he does need extra challenge? Or how can we make sure we're providing continuous progress? Maybe your message is more of a social emotional one. I'm concerned that she's having difficulty making friends. You can share what you see going on at home, but ask questions. What does your teacher see going on at school? Does she have a friend? Is she playing at recess? When she's outside of the content areas, is she participating fully? When she's in groups, do you see her collaborating? These are all things that can help figure out a possible solution. Perhaps it's an identification problem. And for those folks out there who come from certain minority populations, parents, lower socioeconomic status, the parents whose children do not speak English as a first language, realize that there are so many folks out there who are not being identified. In fact, we call it the excellence gap. It's the folks who are not those underrepresented populations who are just being overlooked, and it's a travesty. So maybe your message is, my child did not reach the cutoff scores. Let me share with you what I see going on at home. Maybe show pictures on your phone or bring pictures in or talk to them about the different science experiments your little scientist is doing at home. Focus on the fact that this is what she likes to watch on TV. Doing independent research topics, science related, or maybe even talk about what questions you overheard her asking the curator at the Children's Science Museum. All of these are things that can't be seen at school. And that parental anecdotal evidence is incredibly important when it comes to identification, especially if your child is going to be one that's not scoring well. Maybe twice exceptional student, also has a disability of some sort, where your child doesn't look the same as other kids. So what do we do after we're informed and we have that message? Here's the part where we're going to create a plan together that is going to meet your child's needs. So how do we do that? If you don't know about Sylvia Rim, you need to know about Sylvia Rim. And this comes from a book of hers, Why Bright Kids Make Poor Grades. And notice the alliance guidelines that she sets out. And we are going to look at these each one because they're just so very important. So let's start with the A. You're going to ally with the teacher privately about your concerns, not in the pickup line at school, not when you go to have lunch with your child. It's a one-on-one conversation. You want the teacher to listen to you. So please make sure you're listening to what the teacher has observed about your child. That's where some of those questions can come into play. The teacher is an educational professional. So talk to them. What do you think is best for my child? Have that discussion. And then you need to bring up, what are the strengths that you see? What are the problems that you're seeing with your child? Have the teacher share those as well. Yeah, I've just done crazy somethings. Thank you, Jesse. Look at that middle A. Why don't we just try something? Why don't we experiment for a way for my child to be engaged or interested or in activities? And that experimental part can be very powerful because you're actually just saying, let's try it and see. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Nobody's at fault for that. Try to make sure you're finding appropriate role models and talk to the teacher about that. What can we do? And if those experimental opportunities didn't work, consent to alternatives. Let's try some things. And then be sure that when you're looking at those possibilities, you've got to be as patient as possible. You're going to make an alliance with your child's teacher. This is Amy after she met with the teacher and had a successful conference. And notice what's happening. He's thriving, but this teacher has also become very aware of gifted education and gifted children, and she's learning as well. And so other kids are benefiting. So how do we know the conference has been successful? Where you're going to have a quote like Amy's, that could be one of them. But another way is that you know you've been professional and courteous at all times, demeanor, everything about it. You have been proactive and positive. In fact, a great way to start off is talk about something positive, a good experience your child had in the class. You're going to have that clear message with a good plan. You're going to be very pointed and exact. These are my concerns. You're not going to get bogged down with lots of details and extemporaneous things. You're really going to listen to each other. You're going to figure out a consensus, which is not an easy thing, but very important. And then when each party ensures that all the questions have been addressed, when each party can repeat what was agreed upon, you know that it's been successful and people have really listened. You also need to have a follow-up timeline, and you've got to figure out who's responsible for what and keep a record of that. I do want to point out from you that you can see Joan Smutney's name at the bottom here and in print. As Paulina mentioned, there was a best of the Parenting for High Potential articles put into the NAGC parenting book that won an award she mentioned. We just turned in the second issue of that yesterday, and it will be brand new articles that are the best of parenting for high potential. And Joan Smutney's article that dealt with this is one of those. So I'm going to suggest you be on the lookout for that. Here's another parent who's a pharmacist. I found it refreshing to be able to openly and honestly discuss a child's strengths and weaknesses and work as a cohesive team in developing a plan that best fits the child. Sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? I don't know if you've ever experimented with a student-led conference, but that can be a pretty exciting thing. Typically, you're looking at an older child. Some intermediate students would be ready for it. But what we see here is that you're going to have the child actually do all the pre-conference stuff. That means make the agenda, invite the people to come, get the room. When they come, he would make introductions, talk about what's most important, what are his concerns, look at what are possibilities of answers to that, engage the parents in what that should be, engage the teachers and educators of what can happen, and then leave with a plan. So it's a very, very powerful thing that you may be interested in. Certainly talk to your students, see if your child might be interested in doing that. So that last one is you've got to be an advocate for your child and for gifted education. Now, this is the kind of thing that it can happen year after year after year, because every single year you are focusing just with your child's teachers for that year. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's kind of what we've been talking about. But it will happen every year until he graduates high school, probably. But if you work a little bit broader, and yes, you're working with the teachers, but you're also working with that individual school systemically. What can we do? Can we just have a faculty meeting where we're dispelling myths? That would be awesome, right? Even broader, you can work with the district. For example, when the first report of A Nation Deceived came out, you could get free copies. I sent a free copy to my children's principal, to everybody on the school board, and to the superintendent. And then I followed up with an email. I'd love to talk with you about this. Nobody followed up, but still, I was trying. Also, you can try on the state level. And Paulina started talking about what you guys have done with TAGT and the funding. It's just amazing what has happened when people really work together. Please make sure you're contacting those folks that she mentioned to contact. And then I hope that you're active on the national level as well, because, for example, Javits funding, it's the only federal funding we have. It's been zeroed out again. And NAGC is working very diligently to try to make that be reinstated. Teach your child to self-advocate. There is a wonderful book by Deb Douglas called The Power of Self-Advocacy with Gifted Learners. It's awesome because you're not going to be there in college to advocate for your child. And hopefully by the time your child's middle school, he's advocating for himself. You've got to be involved in your child's school, whether that's helping with PTA or PTO or taking things home to work on and send back. However you can be involved, that makes a difference. People listen to you when they already have a relationship. Share that information. Remember all that stuff we talked about at the beginning? Well, you need to be sharing that with other folks. Share the myths that are out there. Share the best practices, those kinds of things. And then please join an advocacy group. You don't really have to raise your hands. You can mentally raise your hand. How many of you are members of a local group? I hope that's everybody. How many of you are members of TAGT or your other state organization, for those of you from other places? How many of you belong to NAGC? I hope that there were many hands raised, because numbers really, really count. Why is that? Well, if you're just one person, you could be a fruitcake. You could be easily dismissed. Folks aren't going to pay attention to you. And if you have a buddy, well, then you've just got a fruitcake and a friend. 3 people, they're troublemakers. But by the time you get 5, they're going to have a meeting with you. 10 people, they're going to start listening. 25 people, you're suddenly their dear friends. And then when you get 50 or more, you have a powerful organization like the Texas Association for Gifted and Talented. It's so important to be involved. Now, that's what I had to talk to you about. We've got Paulina, I don't know how close we are going to stick with time, but I think I might have covered most of the questions.
Awesome. Well, and we can, I believe our staff will post all of the resources that you mentioned today, and we can continue the conversation. We're always happy to connect you as TAGT members with various resources across our state. So thank you so much, Tracy. Really enlightening, and I hope that everybody on this call found this very helpful on the webinar, and if you're watching later, we ask you to continue to engage with TAGT. So thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you to each and every one of you who've participated this evening. This webinar has been recorded, as we mentioned, and will be available on our website, txgifted.org, this week, along with the facilitator's guide and resource links. If you participated as a group, small or large, please remember to take advantage of the facilitator's guide and spend a few minutes together reflecting on what you've heard today. Also, if you're in a group, we'd love to see and share photos of your group as part of our celebrations this week. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and at hashtags YGT, hashtag GT Week, and hashtag TAGT to see all the posts. To share your photos with us, email those at tagt@txgifted.org. You will receive a feedback survey to let us know what you thought about tonight. Please share your thoughts with us. And finally, TAGT is only able to provide resources like this one with support from our members. Please consider joining TAGT if you're not a member to show your support for this organization and all the GT students in our great state. You can join at txgifted.org. Our sincerest thank you, and we hope to see you very soon at our next webinar.